Hi, my name is Alex Whitney, this is Conspiracy 101, and today we're going to be looking into Operation Paperclip. So, as with every series that we do, every block of 10 episodes, one of those conspiracies is a true conspiracy, a conspiracy that later came out to be factually correct. And today's is Operation Paperclip. You may have heard of it, you might not have. What we're going to do is go through it from beginning to end, but just now we're going to do the cliff notes. We're just going to do brief sort of synopsis of what it is in case you want to check out, and not watch the however long this is going to be, because some of these videos go for a while. So we're just going to do the cliff notes first, in case you are interested in the title, Operation Paperclip. A lot of conspiracies come out of World War II or Second World War, and a lot of them have come to light to be at the very least interesting, and some of them are, like this one, factually correct. So let's have a look at, when you think of history, when you think of the Second World War, what's the best source for that? What's the one that comes to mind immediately? And it's of course the History Channel. So let's monkey around a little bit. So this is a really nice brief synopsis of it. What was Operation Paperclip? This controversial top-secret US intelligence program brought Nazi German scientists to America to harness their brain power for Cold War initiatives. So that kind of sums it up really well, but we're going to go deeper than that. As World War II was entering its final stages, American and British organisations teamed up to scour occupied Germany for as much military, scientific and technological development research as they could uncover. Trailing behind Allied combat troops, groups such as Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, CIOS, began confiscating war-related documents and materials and interrogating scientists as German research facilities were seized by Allied forces. One enlightening discovery, recovered from a toilet at Bonn University, was the Osenberg List, a catalogue of scientists and engineers that had been put to work for the Third Reich. So this is Werner von Braun in the centre, in 1961, with fellow Operation Paperclip scientists working on a Saturn rocket. In a covert affair originally dubbed Operation Overcast, but later renamed Operation Paperclip, roughly 1,600 of these German scientists, along with their families, were brought to the United States to work on America's behalf during the Cold War. The program was run by the newly formed Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, whose goal... They love their acronyms, don't they, America? Whose goal was to harness German and intellectual resources to help develop America's arsenal of rockets and other biological and chemical weapons, and to ensure such coveted information did not fall into the hands of the Soviet Union. That seems to be the sticking point. That's that's the main reason, it seems. It's not just to get the influence of the top German scientists, but make sure they're not influencing someone else. Although he officially sanctioned the operation, President Harry Truman forbade the agency from recruiting any Nazi members or active Nazi supporters. Nevertheless, officials within GIOA and Office of Strategic Services, OSS, the forerunner to the CIA, bypassed this directive by eliminating or whitewashing incriminating evidence of possible war crimes from the scientists' records, believing their intelligence to be crucial to the country's post-war efforts. One of the most well-known recruits was Werner von Braun, the technical director at the Peenemünde Army Research Center in Germany, who was instrumental in developing the lethal V-2 rockets that devastated England during the war. Von Braun and other rocket scientists were brought to Fort Bliss, Texas, and White Sands Proving Grounds, New Mexico, as War Department special employees to assist the US Army with rocket experimentation. Von Braun later became director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and the chief architect of the Saturn V launch vehicle, which eventually propelled 24 American astronauts to the moon. Although defenders of the clandestine... Oh, well, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, that is. That's when I think of World War II, this comes to mind. Although defenders of the clandestine operation argue that the balance of power could have easily shifted to the Soviet Union during the Cold War if these Nazi scientists were not brought to the United States, Opponents point to the ethical cost of ignoring their abhorrent war crimes without punishment or accountability. So there you go, there's the Cliff Notes. A pretty decent article considering its history. But yeah, cool. What more could we possibly add? Well, there is a lot more. And although Wikipedia is going to be our next port of call, sometimes, for some odd reason, other websites just copy verbatim what it says on Wikipedia. Why would you make content that's just reading or just rewriting, copying and pasting Wikipedia? That's stupid, guys. And sometimes those websites are amazing, like this one. So this is Boot Camp and Military Fitness Institute. I don't know what the main purpose of this website is. I don't know if it's just a store of lots of different... It's got downloads, I don't really want to go on that. It was a store, so that's probably why. Lots of different Wikipedia articles. Anyway, what was Operation Paperclip? And if we scroll down to the bottom, this page is based on the copyrighted Wikipedia article. It is literally just the Wikipedia article. So we're going to read through this, and then we'll go back to the Wikipedia and go through, deep dive into some of the other topics. So although this is, beautiful, this is an amazing website. Look at it. It's beautiful. Bootcampmilitaryfitnessinstitute.com. So you know it's legit. And yeah, this is nicer, isn't it, really, than the Wikipedia, especially about how Wikipedia is now. Introduction. Operation Paperclip was a secret US intelligence program in which more than 1,600 Nazi German scientists, engineers and technicians were taken from former Nazi Germany to the US for government employment after the end of World War II in Europe, between 1945 and 1959. Conducted by a joint... I'm not saying that again. It was largely carried out by special agents of the US Army's Counterintelligence Corps. Many of these personnel were former members, and some were former leaders of the Nazi Party. The primary purpose of Operation Paperclip was the US military advantage in... I'm cutting it off, aren't I? In the Soviet Union and American Cold War, and the space race. In a comparable operation, the Soviet Union relocated more than 2,200 German specialists, a total of more than 6,000 people, including family members, with Operation Osaivakim during one night on October 22nd, 1946. So, it's not just the US that are doing this. USSR was doing it as well. And more countries, as you can probably imagine. In February 1945, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHIF, set up T-Force, or Special Section Subdivision, which grew to over 2,000 personnel by June. T-Force examined 5,000 German targets with a high priority on synthetic rubber and oil catalysts, new designs in armoured equipment, V-2 rocket weapons, jet and rocket-propelled aircraft, naval equipment, field radios, secret writing chemicals, aeromedicine research gliders, and scientific industrial personalities. So it wasn't just looking for rocket people or things that they could help in the space race. They were looking for everything war-related. And war is horrible, but it is one of those things that innovates a lot. People looking for new ideas of ways to kill each other. When large numbers of German scientists began to discover in late April, Special Section Subdivision set up the enemy personnel exploitation section to manage and interrogate them. EPES established a detention centre, Dustbin, first in Paris and later in Kranzberg Castle, outside of Frankfurt. The US Joint Chiefs of Staff, JCS, established a secret recruitment program called Operation Overcast, initially to assist in shortening the Japanese War and to aid post-war military research. You have to think victory in Europe wasn't the end of the Second World War. It went on for a few months until Japan surrendered. The term Overcast was first given by the German scientist family members for the housing camp where they were held in Bavaria. In late summer 1945, the JCS established the JIOA, a subcommittee of Joint Intelligence Community, to directly oversee Operation Overcast, later Operation Paperclip. The JIOA representatives included the Army's Director of Intelligence, the Chief of Naval Intelligence, the Assistant Chief of Air Staff II, Air Force Intelligence, and a representative from the State Department. In November 1945, Operation Overcast was renamed Operation Paperclip by Ordnance Corps officers who would attach a paperclip to the folders of those rocket experts whom they wished to employ in America. That's an interesting tidbit. I did not know that. In secret directives circulated on the 3rd of September 1946, President Truman officially approved Operation Paperclip and expanded it to include 1,000 German scientists under temporary, limited military custody. The Osenberg List. In the later part of World War II, Germany was at a logistical disadvantage, having failed to conquer the USSR with Operation Barbarossa and its drive for the Caucasus. The failed conquest had depleted German resources, war on both fronts, and its military-industrial complex was underprepared to defend the Greater Germanic Reich against the Red Army's westward counterattack. If anybody is not familiar with the Second World War, Germany and USSR, Soviet Russia, had an agreement. Germany kind of broke that, tried to take over parts of the USSR, not really realizing that Russia as a country doesn't really care much for their people and has a massive country. So they just kept retreating and pushing lots and lots of people until the Germans were exhausted of everything. For the most part. That is the long and short of it, that is. By early 1943, the German government began recalling from combat of a number of scientists, engineers and technicians. They returned to work in research and development to bolster German defence for a protracted war with the USSR. The recall from frontline combat included 4,000 rocketeers returned to Peenemünde in northeast coastal Germany. I think that's meant to be like from underneath a picture, and they just haven't copied the picture. And the Nazi government's recall of their now useful intellectuals for scientific work first required identifying and locating the scientists, engineers and technicians, then asserting their political and ideological reliability. Werner Ossenberg, the engineer-scientist heading the Verforschungsgemeinschaft, the Defence Research Association, recorded the names of politically cleared men to the Osenberg list, thus reinstating them for scientific work. In March 1945 at Bonn University, a Polish laboratory technician found pieces of the Osenberg list stuffed in a toilet. The subsequent, paper's quite easy to destroy. Why would you stuff it in the toilet? The list subsequently reached MI6, who transmitted it to the US intelligence, then US Army Major Robert B. Staber, Chief of Jet Propulsion Section of Research and Intelligence Branch of the US Army Ordnance Corps. I'm surprised that's not initialized. Used the Osenberg list to compile his list of German scientists to be captured and interrogated. Werner von Braun, Germany's premier rocket scientist, headed Major Staber's list. Identification. In Operation Overcast, Major Staber's original intent was only to interview the scientists, but what he learned changed the operation's purpose. On 22nd of May 1945, he transmitted to the US Pentagon headquarters Colonel Joe Holmes' telegram urging the evacuation of German scientists and their families as most important for the Pacific War effort. Most of Osenberg list engineers worked at the Baltic Coast German Army Research Center, Peenemünde, developing the V-2 rocket. After capturing them, the Allies initially housed them and their families in Landshut, Bavaria in southern Germany. Beginning on the 19th of July 1945, the USJCS managed to capture ARC rocketeers under Operation Overcast. However, when the Camp Overcast name of the scientist quarters became locally known, the program was renamed Operation Paperclip in November 1945. Despite these attempts at secrecy, later that year the press interviewed several of the scientists. Capture and detention. Early on, the US created the Combined Intelligence Operation... CIOS. This provided the information on the targets for the T-Force, that went in and targeted scientific, military and industrial installations and their employees for their know-how. Initial priorities were advanced technology such as infrared that could be used in the war against Japan, finding out what technology had been passed on to Japan, and finally to halt the research. The project to halt the research was codenamed Project Safe Haven, and was not initially targeted against the Soviet Union. Rather, the concern was the German scientists might emigrate and continue research in countries such as Spain, Argentina, or Egypt, all of which had sympathized with Nazi Germany. In order to avoid the complications involved with the emigration of German scientists, the CIOS was responsible for scouting and kidnapping high-profile individuals for the deprivation of technological advancements in nations outside of the US. Much US effort was focused on Saxony and Thuringia, which by the 1st of July 1945 would become part of the Soviet occupation zone. So Germany was kind of split in two between the Soviets and the US British allies. Many German research facilities had personnel had been evacuated to these states, particularly from the Berlin area. Berlin's a weird one, that was split in two as well, but was in East Germany. It's very odd. Berlin's very odd. Fearing that Soviet takeover would limit US ability to exploit German scientific and technical expertise, and not wanting the Soviet Union to benefit from said expertise, the US instigated an evacuation operation of scientific personnel from Saxony and Thuringia, issuing orders such as, "On orders of military government, you are to report with your family and baggage as much as you can tomorrow noon at 1300 hours. At the town square in Bitterfeld. There is no need to bring winter clothing. Easily carried possessions such as family documents, jewelry, and the like should be taken along. You will be transported by motor vehicle to the nearest railway station. From there you will travel on to the west. Please tell the bearer of this letter how large your family is." That was a beautiful American accent. As you can tell, I am well equipped in accents. By 1947, this evacuation operation had netted an estimated 1,800 technicians and scientists, along with 3,700 family members. Those with special skills or knowledge were taken to detention and interrogation centres such as Aldehust, Germany, or one code named Dustbin, located first in Paris and then moved to Kranzberg Castle outside of Frankfurt, to be held and interrogated, in some cases for months. A few of the scientists were gathered as part of Operation Overcast, but most were transported to villages in the countryside where there were neither research facilities nor work. They were provided stipends, so that's like a day allowance basically, and forced to report twice weekly to police headquarters to prevent them from leaving. Stipends is what, like religious, so like priests and imams, they'll get stipends. They're not actually getting paid a wage, but they'll get money still. The Joint Chief of Staff Directive on Research and Teaching stated that technicians and scientists should be released only after all interested agencies were satisfied and all desired intelligence information had been obtained from them. On the 5th of November 1947, the Office of Military Government, United States, OMGUS, which had jurisdiction over western part of occupied Germany, held a conference to consider the status of the evacuees, the monetary claims that the evacuees had filed against the United States, and the possible violation of the US laws of war or rules of land warfare. The OMG-US Director of Intelligence, R.L. Walsh, initiated a program to resettle the evacuees in the Third World, which the Germans referred to as General Walsh's Urwald Program, Jungle Program. However, this program never matured. In 1948, the evacuees received settlements of 69.5 million Reichsmarks from the US, a settlement that soon became severely devalued during the currency reform that introduced the Deutschmark as the official currency of West Germany. John Gimbel concludes that the US held some of Germany's best minds for 3 years, therefore depriving Germany recovery of their expertise, and that's called brain drain. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, because that comes up in lots of different reasons. It's like a spiral, isn't it? When your country's not doing well, it's hard to get out of that spiral, and brain drain is one of the reasons why. Arrivals. In May 1945, the US Navy received in custody Herbert A. Wagner, the inventor of the HS-293 missile, for 2 years. He worked at the Special Devices Center at Castle Gould and at Hempstead House, Long Island, New York. In 1947, he moved to the Naval Air Station Point Mugu. Okay, so these are like actual people. Let's not go through those. Major awards, again. Scientific accomplishments, again, I think it'd be better to look at individuals in a minute. Controversies and investigations. This is more interesting. Before his official approval of the programme, President Truman, for 16 months, was indecisive on the programme. Years later, in 1963, Truman recalled that he was not in the least reluctant to approve Paperclip, but because of relations with the Soviet Union, this had to be done, and was done. Several of the Paperclip scientists were later investigated because of their links with the Nazi Party during the war. Only one Paperclip scientist, George Witney, was formally tried for any crime, and no Paperclip scientist was found guilty of any crime in America or Germany. Witney was returned to Germany in 1947 to stand trial at the Dora trial, where he was acquitted. In 1951, weeks after the US arrival, Walter Schreiber was linked by the Boston Globe to human experiments conducted by Kurt Bloom at the Ravensbrück, and he emigrated to Argentina with the aid of US military. In 1984, Arthur Rudolph, under perceived threat of prosecution relating to his connection as operations director for V-2 missile production, to the use of forced labour from Mittelbau, Dora, at the Mittelwerk, renounced his US citizenship and moved to West Germany, which granted him citizenship. For 50 years, from 1963 to 2013, the Struckold Award, named after Hubertus Struckold, the father of space medicine, for his central role in developing innovations like the spacesuit and space life support systems, was the most prestigious award from the Space Medicine Association, a member organisation of the Aerospace Medical Association. On the 1st of October 2013, in the aftermath of a Wall Street Journal article published on December 1st, 2012, which highlighted his connection to human experiments during World War II. The Space Medicine Association Executive Committee announced that the Space Medicine Association Struckold Award had been retired. Similar operations, so again, we're going to go through those properly. Beautiful. Thank you, Boot Camp Military Fitness Institute. That was a great copied article. I love it. So, that covers pretty much everything in a good way. What we will look at now is the actual Wikipedia article, because it has really nice pictures, despite its strange layout. So let's change that to that. Okay, so Operation Paperclip, we've already been through it. I'm not going through all these. Oh, God. Yeah, it's just too many. Right. So, at the end of the Second World War, America decided to try and get as many German scientists and clever people who work in war industries over to the US so that it could help reduce the time involved in the Pacific theatre. That war, luckily, didn't last much longer, and those US scientists were kept in order to help in the space race and I'm sure other war efforts around the world. So, we've read this, the Eisenberg list, identification. So, these are nice pictures. This is Kurt H. Dubus, a former V-2 rocket scientist who became a NASA director, sitting between US President John F. Kennedy and Vice President Lyndon. So, him. Very interesting. We talked about that, identification. So the V-2 rocket launching. V-2 rockets were basically really... what's the word? Ahead of its time and devastated England. This is the Allied zones of occupation in post-war Germany, highlighting the Soviet zone in red, the inner German border, heavy black line, and the zones from which British and American troops withdrew in July 1945, purple. The provincial boundaries are those of Nazi Germany before the present Länder federal states were established. So this is old Germany. So as you can see, the Soviets came in, France, giving it back to France, and give it back to Poland. Again, the Soviets kept that weird little part up there, and yeah, it's a nice map. I like it. So as you can see, Berlin's quite a way over, and then they ended up half in that. Yeah, that's a cool map. Okay, capture and detention, we've been through this. Arrivals, this is a really nice picture of 104 rocket scientists. So this is Fort Bliss, Texas, and as you can see them all looking very happy. And you can see why there was. It's really hard, isn't it? Especially in retrospect with 2020 vision, of seeing how the Cold War has progressed and how the Pacific Theatre finished the war with Japan and the Allied nations, mainly US. With hindsight, was this needed? But at the time, you can understand why they would do it. However, you can also understand the anger and frustration that people who were a part of a system that killed so many people in such horrible ways were suddenly given freedom and a very healthy, decent life, a happy life in America, creating and, a celebrated life even for some of them when they went on to work with NASA. So you can understand the reticence for something like this. Major awards, again, this is scientific accomplishment. So you've got the Saturn V launch vehicle, and Adolf Busterman was responsible for the swept wing, which improved aircraft performance at high speed. And that's the era Pioneer. What does it say? Oh, it's very funky. Sometimes it gives their what their position was within the Nazi Party, but it doesn't seem to do that one. So I don't know. He seems a bit. There we go. Look, he was a member of the Nazi Party and the SS. Was the major branch of the SS. So you can see how it would be. It must have felt horrible for the people who knew about it, who had either lived through the Second World War or had been had family members who didn't. So here's some of the key recruits, and as you can see, quite a few of these have their own Wikipedia links. So let's click on a few of them. See, most of them are famous for either what they've come up with afterwards, or Operation Paperclip itself. Operation Paper, so there he is. So he was a lawyer, so that's a little bit less. He was a member of the launch crew on Explorer 1. So again, NASA connections, which is always a gold mine for conspiracy theories. And you can. So he was a Luftwaffe aviator. So he was part of the German Air Force. I guess his brother was. Oh, that's the main head honcho. Tailless aircraft. Cool. So yeah, it's Wikipedia does that. And these people, some of these you can see they lived until their 80s, 59. It's not bad. Could be bad, but you get the idea. 86. These are long, fulfilling lives that. Look how many of them have their own Wikipedia links. 94. And they might not have been, scientists, academics for the most part, weren't privy or a main part of war doctrine for the most part. Some of them were. So you've got architectural, electronics, material scientists, medicines, physics, chemistry, and chemical engineering. So let's move. Let's move on to similar operations, and this is where get more and more initialisms. Right. So you got lots of different American versions, but also you have, if I can find it, Operation Osovakin, which we'll look at in a second, and Operation Surgeon, which we'll look at in a second. They are the Soviet Russian USSR version and the British Empire version. So let's have a look at the Russian version first. So this is Operation Ostrovaikin. German scientists repatriated from Sukhumi in 1958, was a secret Soviet operation under which more than 2,500 former Nazi Germany specialists, i.e. scientists, engineers, technicians who worked in specialist areas from companies and institutes relevant to military and economic policy in the Soviet occupation zone of Germany and the Soviet sector of Berlin, as well as around 4,000 more family members, totaling more than 6,000 people, were transported from former Nazi Germany as war reparations in the Soviet Union. The Soviets were very weird with war reparations. They basically saw, after a war had ended, everything that was there is ours now. Like, we'll give you your country, we'll give you your country back. We're not going to take over your country, usually, but we're going to take everything that's there. They did exactly the same thing in Manchuria, when it was occupied by the Japanese. Once the end of the Second World War proper, they just stripped it of everything. And when it was given back to the Chinese, there was nothing there. Much related equipment was also moved. There you go. The aim being literally transplant research and production research centres, such as the relocated V2 rocket centre Mittelwerk, from Germany to the Soviet Union, and collect as much material as possible from test centres such as Luftwaffe's Central Military Aviation Test Centre at Erprobungsstelle Rechlin, taken by the Red Army on the 2nd of May 1945. The code name Ostrovaikin is the acronym of the then large Soviet organisation oh my gosh, talking about acronyms. Ostrovaikin, which recruited civilians for the Red Army during World War II. They later renamed DOSAF, which was mistakenly used for the first time in 1946. That's kind of just a nothing sentence. Campaign served to secure transfer of know-how and described in Russian as foreign experts in the USSR. In some cases, the families of those affected and the furniture was also relocated. The years in the Soviet Union passed without employment contracts and legitimization through personal documents. So that's interesting how America basically made them citizens, or helped them find citizenship elsewhere. But Soviets were just like, no, you're like slaves now. So yeah, operation parallels to other Allied operations such as the Alsos mission. I'm not going to have this too much because I want to try and stay with Operation Paperclip, but this was an organised effort by a team of British and United States military, scientific and intelligence personnel to discover enemy scientific developments. So it's basically looking at stuff rather than people. And then there was also the, I forget what their name was. There was a movie about them, basically looking for art and sculptures and stuff like that. I'm sure we'll come up to it in a second. Background history we don't need to talk about because we've basically just gone through it already. It's just the Soviet version of Operation Paperclip. What makes it interesting is that they didn't do it in a slow, orderly progression, sometimes up to 3 years, like the Americans did, by interrogating them, keeping them in certain places. The Russians had a different way of doing it. Between midnight and 3 a.m, when everybody was asleep, they knew exactly where I lived. First of all, a few days before I was captured, a fellow came. They had a key and everything to the apartment to the door. There was one interpreter who told me in German, "Get up, you are being mobilised to work in Russia." And there were about half a dozen soldiers with machine guns who surrounded me. When I wanted to get to the toilet, they checked it out first to make sure there was no escape hatch. It was a very tight operation. They did that with every family. Many families came while I was alone. So he was there, held in Soviet Union for 6 years. Causes and consequences of the transportation. So they are working in aviation, armaments, telecommunications industry. That seems to be a big one. I think from the 30s to the 50s, that era, that movement from old tube-based components to, new semiconductor components really took off. And I can see why there were so many people in telecommunications. Chemicals, shipbuilding, agricultural machinery, which is really strange. Cinema and photographic industry, petroleum industry, and Ministry of Light industry. Berlin branch of the Social Democratic Party of Germany protested against deportation. That's interesting. So there were people who knew about it and who didn't want it to happen. Wow. Around 20,000 Germans, fitters, foremen, technicians, engineers, designers and scientists, women and children were picked up, loaded and transported in that one night. That's very interesting, but they just wanted people. In following years, equipment from numerous high-tech companies, including those from Carl Zeiss, Junkers and Siebel Works, were dismantled and shipped to the Soviet Union. This was part of reparations payments agreed upon in the Potsdam Agreement. Jet engine and aviation industry. Affected facilities, so there were facilities. BMW was affected. Siemens, where they stayed in the USSR, but it's a huge country. There's more than enough room for everyone, isn't there? You could relocate by the entirety of Germany in the USSR and it'd be fine. Optical and glass industry, that's really interesting. It seems like they took a wider breadth of people, and maybe that wider breadth helped the Soviet Union, but didn't help with their space race, with their Cold War activities. Collection of contemporary press articles. Good, thanks. Crew recruits. So various different people. Former Nazi party member. Aerospace and former SS. A colonel in the SS. This is a nicer way of doing it. Physical chemist, arms designer, engineer and rocket scientists. Really interesting. And what this leans onto is the Wikipedia article on Allied plans for German industry after World War II. And it talks about the Potsdam Conference. And it's a really nice set of articles that just details the history of what the Allied nations, mainly US, UK, or Great Britain back then, and the Soviet Union decided to do with Germany afterwards. And it's very strange, because it's an odd thing, isn't it? I know it's happened lots of times within Europe, but for three such large countries, in terms of the international breadth, to decide what happens on a main European country is very strange. We've seen it disastrously in places like Africa and Southeast Asia, where these superpowers cut up land, even South America previously. But to see it happen in Europe is interesting, how it has evolved over time. And it's something completely different from Operation Paperclip. That's something that's not important to this video, but it's just interesting. And this goes through all the different stuff, and yeah, very odd. All right, so let's briefly look at the British version. Again, this didn't really work out as well as the US and the Soviet versions of Operation Paperclip. Operation Surgeon was a British post-Second World War program to exploit German aeronautics and deny German technical skills to the Soviet Union. Again, that denial of intelligentsia was a really big thing. A list of 1,500 German scientists and technicians was created with the goal of forcibly removing them from Germany, whether they like it or not, to lessen the risk of their falling into enemy hands. It was feared that if they remained in Germany, they could enable the Soviet Union to achieve a long-range bomber force superior to any other in the world. At the operation's inception, many of the scientists had already offered their services to British Commonwealth countries. Sweden... Right, this... that's... All right, let's re-say that, because Sweden is not in the British Commonwealth. Offered their services to British Commonwealth countries, as well as Sweden, Switzerland, Brazil, and South America. It's a terrible sentence. And regarded working for the Soviet Union as a last resort. Should they be prevented from working in Germany and unable to find employment elsewhere in the West? So nobody really wanted to work for the Soviet Union. Russia had... the stereotypes were abound, and I think the treatment of people, both civilian and part of the war, by the Soviet troops was renowned. So I can understand why they would want to work elsewhere before even thinking about USSR. Of the scientists relocated from 46 to 47, 100 chose to work in the UK. British records of the operation were made public in 2006, so it's just become... we've got the ideas of all of them, what we've talked about, isn't it? Right, is there anything else? There is the one... We didn't really talk about brain drain much, but the idea... Let's just see if we can find a nice little human cap. Okay, I did not know that. So it's called human capital flight. It's the emigration or immigration of individuals who have received advanced training at home. So it's brain gain when the net benefits, that's it, is called brain gain. The net cost is called brain drain. And it basically means clever people moving to other places. And if you're forcing those clever people to move to other places, Germany, as it existed after the Second World War, is going to be reduced in the number of clever and smart and kind of people who would make industry and push the boundaries of what's possible. But despite that, Germany has definitely bounced back, and there are lots of different reasons why. So, last one we're going to look at is a opindia.com. Well, I don't know, but it has some nice pictures. So, this one is relatively recent because it talks about the Russia-Ukrainian war. And I think it's in people's minds because there is a lot of old Soviet technology within Ukraine. Places like Chernobyl obviously spring to mind. And the loss of top Ukrainian scientists may be a problem in the future for Ukraine. So we've already read about that. This is Dr. Kurt Blum. He admitted to running horrific medical experiments on healthy prisoners. Reports indicate that his area of expertise included cancer in healthy individuals through viruses and infecting prisoners with diseases like typhus. The US government sent germ warfare specialists from Camp Detrick, Maryland to interview Blum. He worked for the US government for years on programs that are classified. Is there any more pictures? Right, no, that's a really good way, that's a good place to end it, because that is something that's probably going to come up in future Conspiracy 101. Not just the idea of classified documents and unclassifying them and where conspiracy theories come out from that, but the idea of biological, chemical, working on people who are alive, vivisections, springs to mind another Second World War incident involving the Japanese. And that will definitely be a Conspiracy 101 episode in the future. And although the movement of Japanese scientists to the US and other places wasn't as involved as it was in Operation Paperclip, the covering up and denial of what these former Nazi Party members, the atrocities they committed, was scrubbed clean or helped put under the rug. And it's really, I don't know, like I said earlier, hindsight can often make these issues harder to understand and harder to get yourself in the mind. It's 80 years ago. It's a long time ago. A majority of people who experienced it, and the people who came over on Operation Paperclip are dead. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss it and talk about it. Hopefully, this has given you some more insight and some more knowledge on a conspiracy theory that wasn't necessarily conspired. It wasn't a conspiracy theory in the modern interpretation of it, but people did conspire to get this done. And the full extent of it, I still don't think has been revealed, has it? With lots of documents involving these kind of people, ex-former Nazi Party members or Germans during the Second World War, and their involvement in some of the atrocities that happened, aka the Holocaust and the camps. So, on that somber note, I wish you farewell, and I shall see you again next Saturday. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.